Hi, so I'm going to show you a quick device you can make for recycling your clay. You got your clay slopped up in a bucket. You want to have something that you can put it on so you can dry it out evenly so you can recycle it and reuse it. I've got this plastic container here. This is going to be my mold. I'm going to be mixing plaster into this bucket and then pouring it in there. And it's just going to give me a nice plaster slab, just a place to put the clay and let it dry out, and then I can work it. And this can also be for a wedging surface or some other kind of surface that you want to pull some of the moisture out. So when you're working with plaster, you want to fill put the water in the bucket first. So you want to sort of measure it out by volume, kind of how much you want to fill the mold. Here's some water up to about here, and then I'm going to add the plaster in. Pretty steady, not too slow, not too fast. I'm just going to sprinkle it in, and I'm just going to keep going until an island forms in the middle. So when you start to get closer to being having the right amount of powdered plaster in your bucket, you'll start to see an island form, but pretty quickly you see that it just dissolves away. You want to have an island that is there in the middle and not eroding, so it's just staying there consistently. So now I'm ready to mix the plaster. You can see the island is there, it's staying strong. And the best way to mix plaster is just with your hands. I'm just reaching in and grabbing the clumps and squeezing them and mixing it together. Now, plaster is caustic, so it can actually irritate your skin. So after you do this, after you mix it and pour it, you want to rinse your hand and the bucket actually pretty fast before any of the plaster sets up or has a chance to really irritate your skin. So I'm just reaching in and I'm just trying to find clumps of plaster like this, and I'm squeezing them and mixing and squeezing and mixing. For this type of thing, it doesn't have to be exactly precise because you're just kind of making a surface. But I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to pour it into the mold. I've leveled the mold. I've got it sitting on a level surface, so that's just so I can have a nice consistent slab. You want to make sure your mold doesn't have any places where the plaster is going to get trapped, no undercuts. And also, like, a smooth plastic surface works best for just not having to use any kind of mold release like vegetable oil or something like that. So I'm just going to rinse my hands, rinse the bucket. Now, you don't want to pour any kind of plaster down your sink drain because it will cause your drains to get clogged. So I'm going to pour this actually in my trash can, and then it'll dry out and just sort of go down into the trash. So I'm going to let this set up. It's probably going to start to set up even within 15-20 minutes. But I'm going to let it set up for quite a while, probably several hours before trying to pull it out of the mold. I could even, potentially just leave this overnight. As plaster gets more set up, it gets more durable. In the beginning, it's going to still have a lot of moisture in it and be pretty fragile. Okay, so it's the next day. I've got my mold here. The plaster is pretty much set up. It's still pretty moist, but I'm going to take it out of the mold so it can dry more evenly around. And the best way to do this is to actually just take a board and put it right in the center of the plaster, and then take your other hand and just sort of sandwich them, and then you can just flip them over and it should come right out. Now, it's still going to be pretty fragile because it's still got that moisture in it, but I can let this set up, and the drier this gets, the more moisture it'll pull out of the clay. And what's really great about using this kind of tub is that the mold sort of has these ridges set in here, which makes this sort of nice like raised area which air can get underneath. It'll make a little bit of a difference. But when this is dry, I'll show you how to use it to recycle your clay. Okay, so it's been maybe like a week and a half just letting this plaster dry out. It's very, very dry. It doesn't feel cold at all to the touch. It's been sitting out in the hot heat for a long time, and today's gonna be a warm day. So I'm gonna take some of my recycled clay and put it on this slab and let it dry out. Now I'm gonna wanna monitor it, make sure it doesn't dry out too much in certain places. And as the plaster pulls out moisture from the bottom and the heat dries out the outside, I'm going to want to wedge it back together, and probably by the end of the day it should be pretty usable. So you can see that there's quite a bit of water standing on top. I'm going to want to pour that off first and get down to the actual slop. I want to get off as much water as I can before I put it on the plaster. Okay, so I poured off the water. This is what I've got. I've got this sludgy clay, and I'm just gonna sort of spread it around and pile it up for now, and then as the day goes on and it starts to dry out, I'm gonna wedge it, probably make a couple of rainbow bridges, which lets the air get around it a little bit more. All right, so I'm gonna let this dry out and then start to let it dry out, and then just monitor it throughout the day. So you can see this has only been on here for maybe like 10 minutes or so, and this part is already starting to dry out just because the plaster is pulling that moisture out of the clay. Okay, so it's been sitting out for quite a long time. The top is set up quite a bit. I should be able to just peel this up just like this, and then I can start to unstable table. I can start to wedge this in. I'm still gonna need to let this dry out quite a bit. It's still pretty wet, but it's on its way. So it's been sitting out a little bit longer. I'm gonna take it up again. You can see how it comes right off the plaster. There's a couple bits still stuck on here. I'm just gonna wedge this up, sort of feel it out. It's feeling pretty good. I'm just gonna put it inside. It's, you know, the day's almost over, so I'm just gonna put it inside until tomorrow and kind of work it a little bit, wedge it a bit more, and it should be pretty usable. Okay, so I had to put it away overnight. It wasn't quite completely set up. It's pretty close. I mean, I've wedged it. It seems like it's in pretty good shape, but it's still a little soft. So one trick that I might want to do is to work it into a bit of a rainbow shape, or bridge, or whatever you like. So basically just making a big giant log. I'm just gonna squeeze it into this sort of an arch shape. And what this does is it allows air to circulate nicely around the whole thing. I'm gonna let this sit here for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes to an hour. Then I'll come back and wedge it, and it should be ready to go. So here I've probably done about 20 pounds of clay. Pretty minimal amount of work. It was slop yesterday. Spread it on this, let it set out, and now I'm just kind of getting it to the point of the right dryness level. Then I'll wedge it, put it in a bag, and it'll be ready for me to use on the wheel.